Hello there. This is part two of my series on the tactics of the left. Now, what was interesting yesterday on Twitter was that Harry Robinson of the Lotus Eaters podcast made an interesting point about Gamergate and Anita Sarkeesian, if you can remember those. He was saying that essentially Anita Sarkeesian won because you have a look at the gaming industry now compared to what it was. You know, the allegations of sexism within the gaming industry was ramped up, and it was used as a crusade against gaming developers as they were at the time, gaming companies as they were at the time, because of Sarkeesian's attacks and exposés and her articles in various media outlets. And remember, Anita Sarkeesian said, her famous quote, "Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it out all of the time." And that leads into what I'm going to be talking about today, which is the influence of Michel Foucault on left-wing tactics, contemporary left-wing tactics. Because if you swap out sort of everything is sexist, racist, homophobic, whatever, and replace those words with the word bourgeois, which I talked about in episode 1. So everything is bourgeois, and you have to point it out all of the time. It's the same principle. It's like you go after anything that is established, anything that is the norm, anything that is enjoyed by wide section of society, attack it as bourgeois. Although we've taken out these days, the word bourgeois has fallen out of favour. It never really caught on that much in the Anglosphere. Anyway, it's very much a continental European term of disparagement. But if you think about the word bourgeois and start applying it as a kind of say cisnormative, heteronormative, that kind of thing, white supremacy. This is what has replaced that word, but the tactic is still the same that Foucault describes. So there's others who contributed to developing these tactics of attack on Western society and just the structure of society in general. But I'm going to talk mostly about Foucault. So he's another one of these 20th century French Marxist philosophers, and his background is somewhat problematic, to coin a phrase. He's a nonce. But early on in Foucault's writings, he became very interested in Jeremy Bentham's idea of the panopticon. This was a form of prison incarceration, the panopticon being a vantage point where the prison guards could view the prisoners 24 hours a day from any vantage point. So it was like this kind of central viewing platform that you could see prisoners, that the prisoners would not have a single private moment. There was nowhere they could hide from the gaze of their wardens. So he became very interested in that, and then expanded his ideas into thinking about prisons, the nature of prisons. And he thought that prisons were there to condition people who had transgressed not just the law, but bourgeois norms. So the law is created primarily by the bourgeois, in his opinion. Remember that these continental left-wing thinkers disregard the vast majority of history that occurred before the 18th century. So laws are a bourgeois creation, courts, due process, bourgeois creation, and what they're designed to do is to convert, you keep the miscreants, the free thinkers, the free agents away from the bourgeois normal society. And I'll get into why he has this. He doesn't view people in prison necessarily as criminals. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So that's what prison function is, to take the miscreants, the deviants from bourgeois society away. Keep them away until they learn to become bourgeois and fit in. And those who can't get executed. So he ran with that idea for a bit. And then once you've created that formula, you can apply it in other areas. So the next thing he talks about, mental institutions, mental health institutions and asylums, running along the same principles that the bourgeois have decided amongst themselves what is sane, normal behaviour, and anybody who doesn't conform to that bourgeois way of thinking is insane, and they must be locked away in these mental asylums. And so, because they just don't conform to the bourgeois expectations. So they have to be kept away until they can prove that they can operate and function within bourgeois society. And because of that one really took traction, and the consequence of that was the care in the community, where all the asylums were shut down, and people with mental health problems were just allowed to live in the community. And we've seen the disastrous consequences of that. We have rampant homelessness in most of the west cities. We have kind of violent outbursts. People are pretty much unable to look after themselves. And that clash between, well, yes, there is a kind of normal society, but it's not necessarily the bourgeois interpretation. It's just, as I said, over the course of human history, humans learn how to behave around each other. And so the norms do not come out as some bourgeois top-down interpretation. They arise from how people just normally interact with each other. And you have this clash between those who cannot or will not and who can become a danger to them, threat to themselves and to others. With just kind of everyday society. So this is one of the consequences. So once he attacked mental health, it's the asylum system. Schools are where you take children and you make them bourgeois, make them conform. Now I know a lot of people on the right wing who think the same thing, particularly on the libertarian side, but they would say that it's not conditioning children to become bourgeois, but it's conditioning children to become socialists and Marxists. And there is some truth to that. But really Foucault was pressing that idea, and his ultimate one, the ultimate endpoint of Foucault's thinking, using the same tactics, is hospitals. See, the bourgeois have decided what is physical health, the parameters of physical health. And if you do not fit within the parameters of physical health, you are confined in a hospital until you learn to become, to conform to bourgeois physical norms. That is the ultimate endpoint of that line of thinking. And I consider that an insane idea. But his view on everything, anything that was an institution, could be attacked under the same rubric, that this is bourgeois. And therefore it's bourgeois, i.e. the norm, the accepted, the tried and tested. It has to be attacked and overthrown. What is interesting is that, particularly in the United Kingdom, is that health is not seen in Foucault in terms. It's now elevated the status of a church or a religion. So that's kind of where he went off the rails. The irony is that in the later years of his life, when he was suffering from AIDS and dying, he actually turned to the hospitals and the hospices for care, and he actually recanted quite a lot of what he said in the last years of his life, as he came to depend on the very things that he'd built his career on attacking. So the other thing about Foucault's influence is his disregard of the criminal justice system. This is what I was alluding to earlier. Is that the courts, the law, the legal system is bourgeois. It's imposed to say this is the norms, and the justice system, judges, impartial judges. He was very much against those, and he preferred what was called proletarian justice, which is it's whatever the proletarian oppressed mob decide what is justice. So it's a very arbitrary system. I know that his thoughts on this were shared by the American socialist commentator J.K. Galbraith, who has articulated a justice system based around equity and not around facts and the adversarial legal system. Is this starting to sound familiar? Well, of course, this is the legacy of Foucault and Galbraith's thinking, what we have today. So you saw this in the case of the Coulsdon statue vandals. They got let off because the judge decided that they weren't going to apply the rule of law, but some kind of equity justice. You could argue that you saw this in the Derek Chauvin trial, that there was a lot of facts being brought to the court, but those facts were disregarded because the verdict had to be equitable. And you saw an attempt to do this in the Carl Rittenhouse trial in America, where facts were warped. He crossed state lines, which isn't a crime in itself, but it got talked up in the media as if it was a crime, and they tried to go down a road where facts, and it was quite an intricate case, the Rittenhouse trial, because there was ways of interpreting it. And for the record, I think the right verdict was reached in the end. But you notice that in the reactions of that, the facts that didn't fit the narrative had to be discarded because, justice, racial justice, equitable justice had to be served. People's politics had to come before the facts, and so this is why you get a huge amount of misreporting on that. So this is the legacy of Foucault and Galbraith that you've got to understand. And when they attacked the bourgeois, you can easily translate that into modern day speak, which is the bourgeois is now white, heteronormative, cisgendered. This kind of thing. The individual words change, and I will talk in a future chapter about semantics and the semantic games that are being played. But the modern day left do take their lead from Foucault on this. That any existing structure that is accepted as the norm can be attacked in exactly the same way that Foucault did. So until next time, chapter 3, have a great rest of the day, and I'll see you next time.